Welcome back to the workshop. I'm Josh, and this is episode 3 and the last episode of how to make money sharpening knives. In this episode, I'll talk with Matt Rowell, who owns his own knife sharpening business as a side hustle and founded the Guild of Professional Sharpeners. Matt's going to share some great tips for how you can get started sharpening knives and making a little money. All right, now we're joined by Matt Rowell from New Hampshire. Matt is the owner, founder of The American Edge. Matt, really glad to have you here. Excited to hear more about your sharpening business. Obviously, I can see in the background there that you've got the full setup. How did you get into this?
Thanks so much, Josh. I really appreciate you taking an interest in my story, and I love what you guys are doing. My story is unique like they all are, and it goes back to a shipping container in the desert in Africa, and I deployed there in 2015. And I took a staff job, and I'm kind of a hands-on type person, so I needed an outlet. I needed something to do with my hands. And looking back now, I'm a little bit ashamed of how little I knew about sharpening at that stage in my life, but I was really starting from nothing. And I saw an ad on like the Craigslist equivalent inside Camp Lemonnier, which is in Djibouti. And there was somebody advertising knife sharpening, and that just like the light bulb went off in my head. Like, that's the thing that I need to do because I'm living in a shipping container, so I have no space. I had nothing, right? So but it was something that I could do with my hands. Like, I'm walking around a bunch of people who are carrying knives, so there's a bunch of knives to sharpen. And it would engage my brain because I needed to learn the skill. So I bought a sharpener and had it shipped out to Africa. And that's where the learning how to sharpen story begins. And then when I came home, I had ambitions and dreams to build some stuff on my homestead. And it required not a lot of money, but more money than I had. So I continued sharpening, and I figured out how to monetize the skill. And it worked, and it's grown into something that has really been life-changing for me.
Well, thanks for your service, first of all. And what system did you use to teach yourself to sharpen?
Yeah, so knowing nothing at all, this is good too. Like, the ad that I looked at was it was an Edge Pro, and the guy included like all like the angles he uses and stuff. So I just bought what he said he had from that ad. Because I kind of knew nothing at the time, but it worked out. Like, I like the Edge Pro, and it worked well for me. So yeah, that's where it started.
Nice. Yeah, interesting. When you move back and set your ambitions to sharpening and making a little side money for the homestead, where did you find your first customers, and how did you build that business?
Okay, that's a really good question. And the way that I went about it, and the way that I kind of advocate for a lot of people, is to start with your own knives. So most of us are going to have a suite of knives like that we carry, and also in our kitchen. So start there and get really good at it. Don't be shy about dulling your knife and then getting it sharp again. And then the progression out from there, in my opinion, is family, and then friends, and just start communicating, like really get comfortable communicating that you're sharpening knives, which for me, like, that was actually kind of hard. And that's a critical aspect of marketing. But when you start with your family and friends, you can kind of break the ice and get used to it. And then you get more skills. You start seeing stranger things, and you have to figure like different things out that maybe you hadn't seen before. And then I also advocate doing those for free, but really in exchange for reviews. So if this is something that then you like and you decide that you want to monetize it, one of the best ways to gain trust from strangers is through reviews. And if you have a list of friends and family that you have sharpened for, hopefully you can relatively quickly grow your 5-star reviews on your platform of choice.
Outside of family and friends, where did you take that business as a next step? Did it grow word of mouth? Did you find specialty customers in restaurants or other areas?
Okay, so that's a great question. And for me, I feel like I had to brute force my way through it. And I have not really been an entrepreneur by nature. So I feel like I learned a lot of this stuff the hard way, but there are some things that are helpful, like getting a Google My Business profile so that when somebody searches for sharpeners, they can find you. Like getting in front of the people looking for you is most important. But also for me, like I built a Facebook page and just made it a habit to put something up every week and just share information there. I try to communicate it also within groups, like Facebook groups, like there's a group for my town and I would share my service there. And I think that's it. I did do a farmer's market, which helped me get the word out in town, but I wonder if that was pretty early on, actually. So yeah, I thought like to group that into, like that was getting out and getting in front of people and advertising the business there.
Along that journey, did you find, or is there a certain set of specialty tools that you have found a niche in sharpening? A lot of people, like I think knives are used by every household in America, especially in the kitchen. But I think there's also, it could be overstated, and some of the other guys have mentioned that there's some specialty tools that they stumbled into sharpening. If you found a niche like that.
Yeah, I love that. And I'd like to like kind of say like the way that I grew my business was to advertise kitchen cutlery and then listen when people say, oh, that's nice, but do you sharpen, you know, like that's how I learned how to grow my business. And then it was frustrating at first, but then I realized like every time somebody asks me that, that's an opportunity. That's something that is not really being served adequately because they need it. I used what you're asking as a way to grow the business. There's still some oddball stuff, but I guess like you get into it, it's not oddball. Like the dental industry seems oddball until you realize how many dentists there are and how much there is. Scissors and sewing enthusiasts and businesses is pretty big for scissors. But I would say there is another like takeaway from your question is that there is so much opportunity and I still turn down work because I'm not set up for it or I have too much going on to grow into it.
Is this what you do full time, or is this still a booming side hustle?
This is a booming side hustle, and I really like it as a side hustle model. But I also know people that go full time, and I will vouch that there is adequate work to go full time. There's adequate work to go full time and hire people because there's too much work. It's dependent on, you know, personally or for other people, like what you want to grow and what you're looking for. For me, it's a really awesome side hustle.
How do you charge for a knife? Is that is it like by inch, or is it, you know, a small knife is a set amount, a large knife is another amount? How do you kind of go about that?
Yeah, so my philosophy there is I try to keep it as simple as possible because I have seen some price sheets for like every knife. It's just, I don't even understand it, and I sharpen knives. Yeah. So I do $1 per inch of blade, not less than $5 a knife. Okay. So like an 8-inch chef knife is $8. I do charge $1.50 per inch for serrated blades, but yeah, I try to make it a succinct statement: $1 per inch of blade, not less than $5 a knife.
What is your go-to setup? I mean, I see the canned onions behind you. I know that can't be what you use for every single thing, but we've talked. I know you use that a bit.
Yeah, I was thinking about it, man. Like you guys build out like your perfect customer, and I suspect I don't actually fit that avatar because I probably put a lot of hours on those. And my setup is I do start on a 1x30. This is for kitchen cutlery. I start on 1x30, and then I have a series of 3 canned onions with the blade grinding attachments set up. So I kind of march a knife through 4 different belts or grit progressions. Oh, I do some carry knives over here too. I do some carry knives on stones as well.
Gotcha.
But for kitchen cutlery, which is the bread and butter of my business, that's my setup.
What are the belt grits as you progress through that? And do you change those ever, or do you have an edge that you put on the knives that you sharpen?
Yeah, so I love changing. I'm always into experimenting and trying new things, right? So I hope to never like settle in and say like, this is how you do it, because I'm always interested in learning more, and there's so much to learn. But I start with a 120 grit on the 1x30, and then I go 400, 1200, and then I do a leather belt with Tormek paste on it.
That probably puts, is that white, is it like that Jeweler's Rouge I forget what the micron is on that, but that's pretty fine stuff.
It is fine. And honestly, I don't remember what it is either. Yo, but to show like how lucrative it can be, like if I'm doing a knife in 2 minutes and I'm making $10 on it, like there's not many professions that return that. I don't know. I just, when you're turning $120 an hour sharpening knives, people are like, no, you don't. Like, well, actually I do.
Yeah. Right. If you can build that up and have a batch of knives ready to go to run through the system and turn on the music or whatever you got and bust through it, man, it is. I mean, exactly why we wanted to do this video. There's some significant opportunity in this. And again, like coming from the side of we sell the knife sharpeners, everyone at home has the opportunity to do this. And if you master this skill, just like anything else, we all have contractors that will either work on our home or we spend the time to learn how to do the skill that we need to repair some plumbing or run some electrical or patch the drywall. At some point, it's a choice that everyone gets to make, and this is a service that applies to everyone. And if you're the person who decides to master that skill and build up a book of business, there's an incredible opportunity here.
If I could just add on to that too, right? Like any knife gets dull with time and use. So if you can acquire a customer once and then keep a database and reach back to them every 6 months or a year. And that was one way that I grew, was like just keeping track of customers and offering them a 10% discount after a year or 6 months goes by. And like now you get recurring business year on year, right? So yeah, I'm amped about it. Like there's all these reasons to do it, but relatively low startup cost too.
Yeah, right. I mean, you could do this with one or two. I mean, the Ken Onion blade grinders are a pretty easy way to get involved, but there's other lower cost sharpeners if that's really what you want to get into. And how many of your customers are repeat customers? And then what do you use, like practically, what's the database that you use? Do you just have a long Excel sheet? Do you have a notebook? Like what's the practical way you keep track of that?
That's a really good question. And it's one that we, as a community, we continue to noodle on. So my business is busy enough so that I actually don't do any active marketing now. And I'm actually throttling work by using an appointment service. So I haven't been reaching back to people like on purpose. But the platform that I was using was just a running Excel spreadsheet, and I just had like a line that went across it, and I'd move the line down and be like, just indicate that I had reached back to that person.
Do most of your customers come in and like, do they drop it off at your shop? Do you pick it up? Do you have a specific pickup point where the transaction happens? Yeah, how does that work?
Yeah, I'm perpetually enamored by all the different models out there, like the mobile sharpening and the pickup and drop off. But I've built a system where people drive to me, drop their stuff off. I do the sharpening in the evening, and then I send a note and they come back and pick them up. So they're like, when I've built a system that works like that, there's really not much incentive for me to build a system where I have to go travel and do more work and buy a vehicle or something. So
right.
Yeah, mine is a series of, I have drop boxes at the end of my driveway, and I keep a lock inside of them. And then when people come in, they'll take the lock out, put their knives in, and lock their knives in there so they're safe. And then it's one of those locks where I can change the code on it. So when the knives are done, I'll tell them that they're in box number 1 and the code is whatever it is, and they can come by when they're ready and pick them up.
How many knives does each customer typically bring in with an order?
So anywhere, like 1 is kind of rare, 2 is also a little rare, but somewhere like in the 3 to 5 is pretty common, and then like a full block of 8 or 10 also happens as well. Is
it mostly higher end knives, or does it matter?
I wish there was more higher end knives, and I'm trying to be like, I never want to like insult anybody by saying something that they might perceive as insulting about their knives. But I recognize the value in high-end cutlery, and by not using it, I feel like we're missing out on stuff like this joy that we could experience every day when we prepare food. Like we could have a knife where we look forward to grabbing it and be like, I can't wait to use this thing again. And when the sharpening cost is more than the cost to replace the item, I mean, it's not as much fun as a sharpener, right? Like sharpening high-end steel just feels good. And they come out awesome. Like that's enjoyable. So I do see high-end cutlery. I've also like kind of like, you know, those are the pictures I put up on Facebook and stuff like that. So I do also attract that, but I do get the, you know, the, I don't want to be insulted, but the lower end knives come in often enough as well.
Yeah, it's Dexter said if there's value, like this knife has value to you because you use it every single day, it's still worth sharpening no matter what you paid for it.
Yeah, I'd like to emphasize the point Dexter was making, and the way I see it too is like as a third party, we can't really know the sentimental value between a knife and a person. Like it could be a, you know, to us, it could be a garbage knife, but it was like the grandfathers passed me down and like they went hunting with it the first time. And like, there is no price tag you could put on that knife for that person. And I respect that. So yeah, just, never want to offer some information that might be perceived as insulting to somebody because we don't know.
I guess boil it down, if there's one piece of advice to give to somebody who's considering this, you know, watching this video, interested in it. The title is How to Make Money Sharpening Knives. What's the advice, the next step? What would you recommend?
Yeah, I use this a lot. It's patience and persistence. Like you got to keep going. And like when it gets hard, because it's going to get hard, like you're going to do a marketing thing and nobody's going to call you. And it's going to be frustrating, but it's okay. Go do the next marketing thing, right? It's patience and persistence, and every day show up. The thing I pitch in the guild is 1 hour a day, 5 days a week. If there's not knives on the bench, then you're practicing or you're marketing or you're doing something, but you got to show up every day, patience and persistence.
Yeah, and that's a great tip. An hour a day, probably for anything you love. An hour a day, 5 days a week. And if it's not, you know, if the business isn't knocking down the door, then that hour can be spent trying to drum up new business. That's a great piece of advice. In preparation for this, I haven't shared this story yet, but in preparation for this, I thought, well, how hard could it be? So I threw up a post on Craigslist, and I said, all right, I'm gonna advertise here, and I threw out some pricing that was roughly in line with what you're saying, $5 to $10 a knife. I probably overcomplicated it, but I got one call. And the guy was not asking me to sharpen his knife. He asked me if I knew how to fix his Assassin's Creed style of knife. And I said, no, I don't. I really don't know how to fix that. He made it himself. I think this is something that like goes on the arm and you probably hold in your hand. And that was the only call I got. I had to let him down and say, I don't know how to do this, and I really don't know anyone who specializes in that, so I'm sorry. And but so far I'm out $5. But you know, luckily this isn't a, I don't know, maybe this is something I might pursue in the off time. I don't think that's a conflict of interest, but either way, it might take a little bit more persistence than that. You know, I had 15 minutes invested in that Craigslist post. But if I were going to put an hour a day for 5 days a week, it could probably materialize into something a little bit more than a helpful phone call or a not so helpful phone call.
I love that, dude. I was gonna suggest like, why aren't you sharpening knives? And then I love it, dude. I was saying like it's frustrating how the people like that you market to are like, oh, that's cool that you sharpen knives, but do you fix my thing that I tried to? No, man, I'm trying to sharpen knives, dude.
Yeah. If it's dull, I can sharpen it, but otherwise, I don't know. I'm not much of a help.
People probably think I'm crazy because I'm so willing to teach the skill of sharpening. And I bet there's this old school logic where like, well, if you teach people how to sharpen, then they're not going to use your business. And I don't think it's true. I think it's like actually really okay to teach people how to sharpen, and they're going to be, if they actually get the skill and take it on, then they'll be grateful and you will have improved their life, and they're going to tell their friends about it. And then when they get things that they can't sharpen or they don't feel good about or whatever, then they're going to call you because you hooked them up. I'm all about teaching people how to sharpen. Dude, I turned down some work today. A dude bought a sword for his daughter and asked me if I could dull it for him. And I was on the phone with him and I just like, how about I just give you some ideas and you can dull your sword for you? So we went through like, do you have a steel in your block, or do you have like, could you flip a ceramic plate over and expose any, and just like drag it across there and like just do a little bit at a time and see how it goes. And it's just one of those things. Like I could have said, yeah, that'll be $20, you know, and like,
yep.
And we don't need to do that. Like,
yeah, that's that's great though. I mean, that's funny. He'll come back to you when she's ready to have that sword sharpened, and he'll remember that.
Exactly.
Very interesting. Matt, thanks so much for joining me and us and sharing your knowledge today. Very valuable, and I have a feeling that we'll be hearing from you again in the future. If you want to get in touch with Matt, or if you're local to the northern New England, New Hampshire area, Matt is based out of Lee, New Hampshire, and you can find him at AmericanEdge.com. Or if you're interested in starting your own knife sharpening business, the Guild of Professional Sharpeners might be a great fit for you, and you can find that at guildofsharpeners.org. I get that right?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Josh. I appreciate you guys.
Thank you for watching, and thanks again to Matt. We appreciate your time and sharing your tips and tricks with us. If you enjoyed this type of content, how to make money sharpening knives, and some of the details that these guys have shared through the course of these 3 videos, leave us a comment. We love reading those. We'll answer your questions in the comments, and we get a lot of our ideas for future videos by reading those comments. Thanks again for watching and supporting our channel. We'll see you on the next video.